Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating character studies in George R.R. Martin's entire literary universe. We're going to compare two men separated by nearly a century of Westerosi history, yet bound together by an unwavering commitment to honor and duty. I'm talking about Sir Duncan the Tall, the humble hedge knight from the Tales of Dunk and Egg novellas, and Eddard Stark, the Lord of Winterfell, whose execution shocked the world in the first season of Game of Thrones. Now, you might be thinking these two characters are essentially the same, just different versions of the honorable warrior archetype that Martin loves to explore. But here's what makes this comparison so compelling. The differences between Dunk and Ned's approaches to honor reveal something profound about how environment, class, and personal experience shape our moral codes. While both men are willing to die for their principles, the way they understand and apply those principles couldn't be more different. So let's break down what honor actually means to each of these characters, where their philosophies align, where they diverge, and what their respective fates teach us about the nature of virtue in Martin's brutal world. Let's start with Sir Duncan the Tall because his story comes first chronologically, set roughly 90 years before the events of A Game of Thrones. Dunk's understanding of honor is beautifully simple and deeply practical. He's a hedge knight, which means he has no lands, no great house backing him, no inherited wealth or position. Everything he has, including his knighthood itself, is somewhat questionable. We never actually see his mentor, Sir Arlan of Pennytree, knight him in the stories. Dunk claims it happened, but there were no witnesses, and this ambiguity haunts him throughout the novellas. This background is crucial to understanding Dunk's honor code. For him, honor isn't about maintaining reputation or preserving some ancient family legacy. It's about doing the right thing in the moment, regardless of personal cost. When Prince Aerion Brightflame brutalizes a puppeteer at the Ashford tournament, Dunk doesn't calculate political consequences or worry about offending royalty. He sees injustice happening right in front of him, and he acts. His internal monologue is remarkably straightforward. Someone needs to stop this, and no one else is moving, so it has to be me. The beauty of Dunk's honor is its accessibility. He wasn't raised in a castle learning about the noble traditions of chivalry. He grew up in Flea Bottom, one of the worst slums in King's Landing, before Sir Arlan took him as a squire. His understanding of what makes a good knight comes from watching Sir Arlan's actions, not from reading about legendary heroes in dusty tomes. This gives his honor a grounded, almost blue-collar quality. It's less about abstract principles and more about immediate, tangible rightness. Don't let the powerful abuse the weak. Keep your word. Protect those who can't protect themselves. Stand up when you see something wrong happening, especially if no one else will. What's fascinating is how Dunk's humble origins actually strengthen his moral clarity. He doesn't have the luxury of political calculation that highborn lords engage in. He can't think 5 moves ahead in the Game of Thrones because he's not even aware there's a game being played. In The Sworn Sword, when he discovers that Sir Eustace Osgrey fought for the Blackfyre Pretender against Egg's family, Dunk is troubled but ultimately pragmatic. He cares less about which dragon Eustace supported and more about whether Eustace is treating his small folk fairly right now, in the present. Dunk's honor also includes a willingness to adapt. He's not rigidly adherent to some inflexible code. When circumstances demand creativity or moral flexibility, he can find it. He lies about his knighthood by omission. He uses the fact that Egg is secretly Prince Aegon Targaryen to his advantage when necessary, even though he initially resented discovering his squire's true identity. But here's the key distinction. Dunk bends his principles to protect innocent people, never to advance his own position. Every compromise he makes is in service of keeping someone vulnerable from being crushed by the great lords and their political games. The physicality of Dunk's honor is also worth noting. He embodies the principle that if you pass the sentence, you must swing the sword, though in his case, it's more literal. Nearly 7 feet tall and immensely strong, Dunk backs up his moral stands with personal action. When he challenges Aerion to trial by combat, he's not sending someone else to fight for him. He's putting his own body on the line. This creates a direct link between his values and his willingness to suffer for them. There's no abstraction, no distance between belief and consequence. Now let's turn to Eddard Stark, and immediately we're in very different territory. Ned's honor is institutional, structured, and deeply connected to concepts of legitimacy, law, and hereditary right. Where Dunk learned honor from watching a kindly hedge knight treat people decently, Ned learned it from Jon Arryn in the Vale, one of the most traditional and rule-bound regions in Westeros. The Vale's motto is "as high as honor," and that education shaped Ned profoundly. Ned's honor is also inseparable from his identity as Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. He doesn't just believe in doing right by individuals, he believes in upholding systems, in maintaining the structures that theoretically keep civilization functioning. This is why he's so obsessed with legitimacy and rightful succession. When he discovers that Joffrey Baratheon is actually Joffrey Lannister, the product of an incest between Cersei and Jaime, Ned's immediate concern is that Stannis Baratheon must take the throne because he's the rightful heir. Not because Stannis would be a better king, not because it would lead to better outcomes for the realm, but because that's what the law demands. This reveals something crucial about Ned's moral framework. His honor is consequentialist in a strange way. He believes that following the rules will ultimately produce good outcomes, even if the immediate results look terrible. He can't imagine that rigidly adhering to abstract principles of legitimacy might actually cause more suffering than bending those principles would. When Littlefinger suggests that Ned could support Joffrey's claim and essentially govern as the power behind the throne, keeping peace and preventing war, Ned dismisses it immediately. It's not a question of what would be best for the people of Westeros. It's a question of what's legal, what's proper, what's in accordance with tradition. We see the same thinking when Robert Baratheon wants to assassinate Daenerys Targaryen and her unborn child across the Narrow Sea. Ned is disgusted by this plan, which is to his credit, but notice how he frames his objection. It's not primarily about the moral horror of murdering a teenage girl and her baby. It's about honor, about not stooping to such dishonorable tactics. When Robert asks if Ned would have him do nothing, Ned's response is essentially, yes, we should do nothing because doing something would be dishonorable. The potential consequences, a Dothraki invasion, dragons returning to the world, massive bloodshed, these don't factor heavily into his moral calculus. What matters is maintaining his personal honor and, by extension, the honor of House Stark. There's also a religious dimension to Ned's honor that's important to acknowledge. The Starks keep the old gods, and there's a sense in which Ned sees his honor not just as a personal code, but as a sacred duty to those ancient deities. When he executes the Night's Watch deserter in the very first chapter of A Game of Thrones, he does it in front of the heart tree in the Godswood. He's not just enforcing the law of the realm, he's performing a ritual act that connects justice to the divine. This adds a layer of inflexibility to his honor. You can negotiate with political principles or social customs, but you can't negotiate with the gods. The tragedy of Ned's honor is that it's built for a world that doesn't exist anymore, if it ever did. He functions beautifully in the north, where the houses are more straightforward, where guest right is sacred, where people generally mean what they say. But in King's Landing, he's catastrophically out of his depth. He expects others to play by the same rules he follows, and he's genuinely shocked when they don't. When Cersei tears up Robert's written decree naming Ned Protector of the Realm, Ned is stunned. In his worldview, that piece of paper should matter. It's a legal document, signed by the king. But Cersei understands what Ned doesn't. That power comes from swords and alliances, not from parchment and sealing wax. Despite these differences in how they conceptualize honor, Dunk and Ned share some fundamental commitments. Both men believe absolutely in protecting the innocent, particularly children. Dunk's entire arc in The Hedge Knight begins with him defending a performer from a sadistic prince. Ned's defining characteristic in King's Landing is his horror at the idea of murdering Daenerys. Neither man can stomach the strong preying on the weak. Both also share a willingness to sacrifice themselves for their principles. This isn't abstract martyrdom, it's a practical readiness to pay personally for moral stands. Dunk risks execution by demanding trial by combat against royalty. Ned walks into obvious danger by confronting Cersei about her children's parentage. Neither man backs down when their safety is threatened. They both understand that honor without sacrifice is just empty words. There's also a shared simplicity to their moral vision, though it manifests differently. Dunk's simplicity is about directness, see wrong, stop wrong, done. Ned's simplicity is about clarity of principle. There's a right way and a wrong way, and you always choose right, regardless of circumstances. Neither man is comfortable with the kind of layered, strategic thinking that characters like Littlefinger or Varys engage in constantly. They both want the world to be more straightforward than it is. Interestingly, both men are also defined by a central lie or ambiguity that undercuts their reputations for absolute honesty. Dunk likely lied about being knighted by Sir Arland. Ned lied about Jon Snow's parentage for 15 years, claiming him as his bastard to protect his nephew. This parallel is instructive because it shows that even the most honorable men in Martin's world recognize that rigid adherence to truth-telling can cause greater harm than a strategic deception. But notice that in both cases, the lie is told to protect someone vulnerable. Dunk lies to continue his mentor's legacy and make something of himself. Ned lies to protect Jon from Robert's wrath. Neither lie is self-serving. Both men also inspire tremendous loyalty in others. People follow Dunk because they recognize his genuine decency, his lack of self-interest, his willingness to stand up for them. The same is true of Ned. The Northern Lord's devotion to House Stark, which persists even after Ned's death, and the Red Wedding, isn't just about feudal obligation. It's about the memory of Ned's justice, his fairness, his refusal to abuse his power. In a world full of terrible lords, both Dunk and Ned stand out as men who use their strength to protect rather than exploit. But now we get to the heart of the comparison, the ways in which Dunk and Ned's approaches to honor differ fundamentally, and these differences largely come down to class and context. Dunk's honor is situational and personal. He makes judgments based on the specific circumstances in front of him, not on abstract principles or systematic rules. When he has to choose between conflicting values, he chooses based on who will be hurt most if he doesn't act. His loyalty is to people, not institutions. He serves Egg not because Egg is a Targaryen prince, though that becomes relevant, but because Egg is a clever boy who needs protection and guidance. Ned's honor is systematic and institutional. He makes judgments based on rules, laws, and traditions that exist independently of particular situations. When he has to choose between conflicting values, he chooses based on what the proper order demands. His loyalty is to institutions and abstract principles first, with personal relationships second. He serves Robert not primarily because Robert is his friend, though that matters, but because Robert is the rightful king. This distinction becomes stark when we consider how each man handles political complexity. Dunk essentially refuses to engage with politics. He doesn't want to know about Blackfire rebellions or Targaryen succession crises or any of it. He just wants to do the next right thing in front of him. This is simultaneously his great strength and his limitation. It means he never gets corrupted by political games, but it also means he's often manipulated by people who understand the broader context better than he does. Ned, by contrast, tries to engage with politics on his own terms, which is disastrous. He believes you can play the Game of Thrones honorably, that you can be Hand of the King and maintain your integrity. He's wrong, of course. The political world of King's Landing doesn't reward honor, it exploits it. His unwillingness to compromise, to make strategic alliances, to use the tools available to him, that's not a strength in that environment. It's a fatal weakness. The class dimension is crucial here. Dunk can afford to be apolitical because he has nothing to lose. He's already at the bottom of the social hierarchy. The worst that can happen to him is death, which he's risked many times already. Ned, as a great lord, has everything to lose. His house, his children's futures, the stability of the North. But his honor code doesn't account for those stakes. He treats his personal integrity as more important than strategic thinking, and his family pays the price. There's also a difference in how they relate to violence. Dunk's violence is defensive and immediate. He fights when someone needs protection right now. Ned's violence is judicial and systemic. He executes people according to law. He goes to war to support legal claims. Dunk would never start a war over abstract principles of succession. Ned does exactly that, though the war starts after his death. Let's talk about what happens to these two men because their fates illuminate the costs of their respective honor codes. Dunk survives his various ordeals, barely, because his honor is pragmatic enough to adapt. When he needs to retreat, he retreats. When he needs to accept help from the Targaryen royalty he's inadvertently connected to, he accepts it. When he needs to compromise on minor points to achieve major goods, he does it. His honor has flex in it, and that flex keeps him alive. He eventually rises to become Lord Commander of the King's Guard, a stunning achievement for a hedge knight from Flea Bottom. His success isn't despite his honor, but because of how he applies it, with wisdom and practical judgment. But even Dunk pays a price. We know from the main series that he dies at Summerhall in the Great Fire that kills King Aegon the and most of the Targaryen court. The details are unclear, but the implication is that Dunk died trying to save people, probably trying to save Egg. His death is heroic, but it's still a death. Even practical honor gets you killed eventually in Martin's world. Ned's fate is more straightforward and more brutal. His rigid honor gets him executed on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor while his daughters watch. Every single mistake he makes, trusting Littlefinger, telling Cersei his plans, assuming the City Watch will honor their bribes, all of these flow from his inability to think like his enemies, to anticipate treachery, to understand that power matters more than legitimacy in the Game of Thrones. His honor doesn't just fail to protect him, it actively leads to his destruction. But here's what's interesting about Ned's legacy. His death catalyzes everything that follows. The War of the Five Kings, Robb's campaign, the Red Wedding, the destruction of House Stark and its eventual resurrection. All of it traces back to Ned's execution. In a strange way, his rigid honor, even though it gets him killed, sets in motion events that ultimately lead to the destruction of the Lannisters and the restoration of Northern independence under his children. His honor fails tactically but succeeds strategically, though he's not alive to see it. The comparison reveals something profound about Martin's moral vision. He's not saying honor is bad or that honorable people are fools. He's saying that the kind of honor you practice matters enormously. Dunk's flexible, situation-based honor serves him well. Ned's rigid, principle-based honor gets him killed. But both approaches have value and both have costs. There's also a generational dimension worth considering. Dunk lives in a time when the Targaryen dynasty is stable, relatively speaking. The realm has problems, the Blackfyre rebellions, but the fundamental order holds. Ned lives at the end of an era, after Robert's rebellion has already shattered the old certainties. The world Dunk inhabits still has room for simple honor. The world Ned inhabits has moved beyond that, though he doesn't realize it. Now we need to address this specific question of duty because honor and duty aren't the same thing, and both men navigate this distinction differently. For Dunk, duty is straightforward. He has duties to Egg as his squire, or rather, Egg has duties to him since Egg is technically the squire, but the relationship functions both ways. He has duties to anyone he's sworn service to, like Sir Eustace Osgrey in The Sworn Sword. These duties are personal, contractual, and limited. When the contract ends, so does the duty. When duty conflicts with honor, Dunk follows his honor, but he tries to avoid situations where that conflict becomes sharp. Ned's relationship to duty is far more complicated and ultimately more tragic. He has overlapping duties that constantly conflict. He has a duty to King Robert as Hand of the King. He has a duty to his family as Lord Stark. He has a duty to the realm to ensure legitimate succession. He has a duty to the gods to uphold justice. These duties pull in different directions, and Ned doesn't have a clear framework for prioritizing them. Maester Aemon's famous words capture this dilemma perfectly. Love is the death of duty. He tells Jon Snow that every man eventually faces a day when he must choose between duty and the people he loves, and it always hurts. Ned faces this choice repeatedly. When Robert orders Daenerys killed, Ned must choose between his duty to obey his king and his honor, which won't allow the murder of innocents. He chooses honor and resigns as Hand. When he's in the Black Cells and Varys offers him a way to save his daughters by confessing to treason, Ned must choose between his honor and his love for his children. He chooses love and makes the false confession. That final choice is crucial because it shows that Ned does understand the hierarchy of values when pushed to the absolute limit. His children matter more than his reputation for honesty. But he makes this choice far too late, after he's already made the mistakes that doomed him. A more flexible honor code, one that prioritized protecting his family from the start, might have led to different decisions earlier in the process. Dunk never faces this kind of wrenching choice between honor and love because his honor is flexible enough to accommodate both. When he needs to protect Egg, he does it, and he doesn't agonize about whether it conflicts with some abstract principle. When Egg's identity as Prince Aegon becomes relevant, Dunk adjusts his understanding of his duties accordingly. He's practical, adaptive, and focused on tangible goods rather than abstract principles. The tragedy of Ned's death is that he dies trying to do the right thing according to his understanding, but his understanding is inadequate to the situation he's in. He's a good man in a role that requires not just goodness but cunning, and his honor code doesn't leave room for the kind of cunning that might have saved him. The tragedy of Dunk's story, by contrast, is that he does everything right according to his honor code and still eventually dies at Summerhall. Martin seems to be saying that honor can help you navigate the world more successfully, but it can't save you from mortality or tragedy. One of the most illuminating aspects of both characters is how they teach honor to the younger generation. Dunk is essentially raising and educating Egg, and through that relationship, we see what Dunk values most clearly. He teaches Egg that highborn and lowborn are fundamentally the same, that a prince can learn from small folk, that power without compassion is tyranny. He takes Egg to places and shows him situations that Egg would never encounter in the royal court. This education shapes Egg into King Aegon V, Aegon the Unlikely, whose reign is marked by reforms aimed at protecting small folk from noble abuses. Dunk teaches through example, not through lectures. When Egg sees Dunk stand up to Prince Aerion, sees him risk everything for a stranger, Egg learns what courage actually looks like. When Egg watches Dunk treat every person with basic dignity regardless of their station, Egg learns that nobility is about behavior, not blood. The relationship between Dunk and Egg is one of mutual growth. Egg teaches Dunk about the broader world, about politics and history. Dunk teaches Egg about decency and immediate justice. Ned also tries to teach his children, particularly Robb and Jon, about honor and duty. He takes them to witness executions so they understand that justice has costs. He tells them that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword, that you can't distance yourself from the consequences of your judgments. He teaches them the stark words, "Winter is coming," which he interprets as a call to constant vigilance and preparation. These are valuable lessons, but they're also somewhat rigid and absolute. The problem is that Ned's children each interpret his teachings differently based on their experiences. Robb takes the lesson about honor and applies it inflexibly, leading to the disaster at the Red Wedding when he breaks his marriage pact with the Freys. Jon takes the lesson about duty so seriously that he repeatedly chooses duty over personal desire, which eventually gets him killed by his own men. Sansa learns that her father's honor was inadequate to protect him and becomes a different kind of player entirely. Arya takes the lesson about justice and twists it into a mission of vengeance. Bran transcends human concerns entirely. In other words, Ned's teachings don't prepare his children for the world they actually live in. Dunk's teachings, by contrast, do prepare Egg, precisely because they're more flexible and situation dependent. Egg becomes a reformer king who tries to use his power to help the powerless. Exactly what Dunk would have done if he'd somehow become king. The legacy test suggests that Dunk's approach to honor is more practically successful at preparing the next generation for leadership. So what can we learn from comparing these two honorable men? First, that honor without wisdom is dangerous. Ned's honor is unquestionable, but his wisdom is limited. He doesn't understand the environment he's operating in, doesn't adapt his principles to match the reality of King's Landing. Dunk's honor is combined with practical wisdom, an understanding of when to fight and when to retreat, when to stand firm and when to bend. Second, that the origin of your honor matters. Dunk's honor comes from lived experience and human empathy. Ned's honor comes from tradition and institutional loyalty. The former is more adaptable because it's rooted in concrete situations rather than abstract rules. When the rules don't fit the situation, Dunk can improvise. Ned cannot. Third, that honor and effectiveness aren't always aligned, but they're not always opposed either. Dunk's honor usually serves him well tactically. Ned's honor consistently undermines him tactically. But Ned's honor succeeds strategically in ways he never lives to see. His death inspires loyalty and revenge that ultimately destroys his enemies. Sometimes the long game rewards honor even when the short game punishes it. Fourth, that class matters enormously in how you can practice honor. Dunk has the freedom of having nothing to lose. Ned has responsibilities that constrain his choices. A lord's honor must account for dependents, vassals, political realities. A hedge knight's honor can be purely personal. Neither approach is inherently better, but they require different strategies. Fifth, that Martin is deeply interested in the cost of virtue. Both Dunk and Ned pay prices for their honor. Dunk loses opportunities, faces constant danger, and eventually dies heroically. Ned loses his head and plunges the realm into war. The question isn't whether honor has costs, it obviously does, but whether those costs are worth paying and whether the particular form of honor you practice minimizes unnecessary costs while preserving core values. In the end, Dunk and Ned represent two different answers to the same question. How do you remain a good person in a corrupt world? Dunk's answer is to focus on the immediate, the personal, the tangible. Do the next right thing, protect the person in front of you who needs help. Don't worry about grand strategies or political consequences. Stay true to simple decency. Ned's answer is to maintain systematic integrity, to uphold institutions and rules even when it's costly, to believe that order and legitimacy matter more than expedience, to be the kind of lord who dispenses justice fairly, who keeps faith with tradition, who honors oaths even to his own disadvantage. Martin doesn't definitively say which approach is better because both have profound value and both have tragic limitations. Dunk's approach works better for survival and personal relationships but doesn't address systemic injustices. Ned's approach addresses systemic concerns but fails tactically in corrupt environments. What makes both characters beloved is their sincerity. They genuinely believe in their principles and live them consistently. In a world full of cynics and schemers, Dunk and Ned stand out as men who mean what they say and do what they promise. That integrity is rare and precious, even when it leads to disaster. As we prepare for the upcoming HBO adaptation of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, it's worth reflecting on how Dunk's story will resonate with audiences who know how Ned's story ended. Will viewers see Dunk as a successful version of Ned, a man who proved honor can work if you practice it wisely? Or will they see him as another doomed idealist, temporarily lucky but ultimately headed for the same tragic end? That tension between cynicism and hope, between believing honor matters and knowing it's often punished, that's the heart of Martin's genius as a storyteller. Thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know in the comments how you see the comparison between Dunk and Ned. Do you think Dunk's approach is wiser, or does Ned's systematic honor have advantages Dunk lacks? And which character's legacy do you find more inspiring? I'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring the rich history of Westeros. Until then, remember, honor isn't about being perfect. It's about trying to do right even when it costs you everything.